Hi, Fred.
Hello.
Welcome everyone to the City Council work session for May 4th. First item on the agenda is COVID-19 response, and we'll hear from staff.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, members of the council. We'll start this evening with some of our trends, as we usually do. All right, this graph, as we've seen before, the main line shows the new cases of COVID per week, and this is the Colorado trend line. So we can see that statewide, over the past 4 to 6 weeks, the trend line, new COVID cases have been trending up. Certainly not the kind of spike that we saw back in November, October-November timeline, but they are going up from the what we hoped was a lower level. Zooming into Weld County, this is the Weld County graph, and you can see that there's a similar curve, similar also in the last few weeks, although perhaps a little sharper, just showing that the new cases per week have gone up about 75% from that level that they were about a month or 6 weeks ago. Again, we had all hoped that we'd find that new kind of settling out at the lower level, but they have been on the rise. You'll see also here that how that plays out in terms of hospitalizations and fatalities. The hospitalization line, which is the lighter blue line, given that curve resembles the curve we saw for Weld County. These are new hospitalizations in Weld County, and we can see that the increasing similar to the new cases. We've also heard that intensive care units and overall hospitalization has been on the rise, and we haven't heard the hospitals sound the alarm, but they are certainly starting to let us know that their facilities are being stretched with this new level of hospitalizations. Then if you look at that dark blue line, unfortunately, that is our fatalities line for Weld County. It's only a small change, but you can see that line that had pretty much leveled out about 6 weeks ago is starting to trend up a little bit, also following presumably those new cases. As council is aware, the state, the CDPHE lifted the state dial system of regulations, which and things like that based on several metrics for COVID. That was lifted 2 or 3 weeks ago now. We do keep this slide just so council can keep an eye on those metrics, even though the restrictions per the various levels are no longer in place. But you can see how our positivity rates are a little bit down from where they were 2 weeks ago, hoping that they continue to go down to where they were about 6 weeks ago. Cases per 100,000 in the past 7 days, that's a trend that does continue to go up, about probably a little more than 100 more this week than 2 weeks ago, or I guess last week from 2 weeks prior. And then new hospitalizations per day, they are still rounding to approximately 1. So that is. I want to point out the latest public health order that was released on Sunday reinforced that the dial continues to be lifted, and those kinds of restrictions are in the hands now of counties. Weld County has not issued any COVID rules or restrictions other than their general guidance for people to take their own personal responsibility in stopping the stem of the virus or stopping the spread of the virus. However, in that public health order, there is still one kind of overarching provision that's disconnected from that dial, and that is regarding face coverings. For this, we just pulled out the one provision of a long list of where masks are still required. It includes a lot of places and other places like that. But this is one that does apply to us. For counties with 1 week disease incidence rates in excess of 35,000 per 100,000 population, which when you look at the CDPH website, it's most of the Front Range. Face coverings are required in public indoor spaces where 10 or more unvaccinated individuals or individuals of unknown vaccination status are present. So this is, believe it or not, summarized and simplified from the health order. But I think the short story here is, as the city attorney and we have interpreted this, given Weld County status having more cases per 100,000, we are subject to the mask order in public indoor spaces, the Evans Community Complex being one of those places. And then the next point that the news from this health order said that masks may be removed if 80% of individuals in the public indoor space have shown proof of vaccination. As a practical point, that's not really affecting us because our policy has been since the vaccinations have been available, and it's certainly our plan going forward that we do not ask about or verify vaccination status. So we're not going to be asking or checking to see if people have been vaccinated. But this public health order requiring masks in public spaces is in effect till May 16th. So that's one point that I wanted to highlight tonight because it has been the subject of some question this week. Operational update, I've touched on several of these things regarding the latest CDPHE. No restrictions yet promulgated by Weld County. Just talked about the mask component of the order. In terms of what we're doing at this point, as we told council last time, we are still planning for a full opening of our recreation facilities, all of our summer programs and things like that on June 1st. We're still gaining some feedback from employees about the various protocols that we have in place. And I think some of the feedback that we've heard and also our own hope and plan to kind of taper down those protocols, you're witnessing today. As of yesterday, we took down our health screening at the entrances. That was one thing that we heard from employees was particularly irksome, and we think at this point of that we had seen originally. So we've taken that down, and we're also looking at further actions, especially as the vaccination rates go up, and hopefully we'll see those new cases going down, looking at how we can have more in-person meetings while still allowing remote participation. And we're also looking at the kind of social distancing requirements that we have. Want to make sure that our municipal judge and our court stays safe. We're also looking at spaces like this as we go forward to see how we can get back to more of a normal feel here too. So that's the update. Be glad to answer any questions.
Some staff questions?
I'm glad that we are not asking people for vaccinations. And I don't see even how the state or businesses can do that because that's a HIPAA violation. And I mean, I know our governor and stuff like that thinks that, will show their cards. And last time I checked, we're in the U.S., we don't live in a dictatorship. I'm glad that the city's
Anyone else? So my one question would go back to if you go back 2 slides, I think it was where, one more back. There was just one. No.
Oh.
Sorry, that one there. So you get 12 people and they come in and play basketball. And we don't ask them if they've had their vaccinations, but they take their masks off because it says you can if 80% of them are vaccinated. What is Your thoughts there? What do you do?
We're not asking.
Cool. Perfect. That was the answer I wanted to hear. Basically, they can come in and play basketball however they feel safe for themselves.
Correct. We will have our, expectations at the doors like you've seen. That reflects the state order, but our staff is not asking.
Perfect. I like that. I like the way the approach the county's taken it. I think it's real, and it's been a terrible thing for our country. But my feeling personally is it's time for personal responsibility. Time to do what you think's best for you. If you're not comfortable, wear your mask. If you don't feel comfortable, don't go. But if you are comfortable and you feel good about yourself, and whether you have or haven't gotten a vaccine, do what's best for you. And I hope that's the way the city directs it, kind of very similar to the way the county has. Anything else? Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the road tax reporting documents. We'll turn it back to staff.
Thank you, Mayor. It's fun that we can have this work session because it means we have a road tax. And we had committed during the process of talking with the community about the need for the road tax. We and the council had made a commitment that we would report on the status of the road tax, money we collected, and how it's being used at least annually. So tonight we have for you a report that we would plan to use with your concurrence and with any further direction that you might have about things to include. And I'll ask our finance director, Jackie Trout, to kind of summarize how we arrived at this piece. This one pager was our overriding kind of direction or theme here. And we'll then seek any direction that you have for anything else to include, and then we would plan to roll this out within the next month. And I'll let Jackie. I'll stop stealing her thunder and let her tell you more about it.
Thank you. It is exciting that we can be here talking about a year later, after voters had approved Measure 2A to implement this new 1% sales and use tax. And it's neat to be able to have a tool that hopefully council can give out to constituents. We can have here available for the public. Also anticipate putting on the website to try to get the word out. The more and more that we can help share the good work that we're doing with this money, the more benefit for everybody here. So this represents information from January 1, when the tax was first implemented, through the end of December 2020. And the intention here was really just to show cumulatively how much revenue we've brought in, about $1.2 million in that first half of the year that the tax was effective. And we spent in that time about $400,000. So while we didn't spend it all, the intention there in that orange chart is to be able to show some of the upcoming projects that we intend for this money to help further. Each time we do this report, we'll highlight both an expansion project and a maintenance project and some of the work done there, just to give some visuals and pictures, and you can remember, oh yeah, that's right, I drove down that road and it was so great, and this money helped to pay for that. So with that, just would welcome any feedback that you might have and reactions from a first glance.
Comments?
I'm actually quite impressed. In a 6-month period, we collected $1.2 million despite everything that was going on in 2020. That's phenomenal. And I've heard feedback from a lot of constituents and everything like that. They're actually really impressed with what's going on in Evans Road. We've seen a lot of improvements, and I'm glad we're able to, show them what we were going to do with the money. That's fantastic.
Comments or questions, Fred?
Are we planning on sending this out with a water bill?
We looked into that option. It costs about $1,100 to include a color one page that we would like to have some Spanish translation on, so it would be double-sided. Thinking maybe as we get into year 2, year 3, and we'll have some larger cumulative dollars to really tout at that point and show some additional progress, our staff's recommendation would be to come back and look at maybe that investment.
I think a lot of people would be just impressed with that $1.2 million funding in just 6 months too.
And have additional printed copies. We anticipate they'll be in the lobby. You're welcome to grab a stack, or if you have folks who'd like to, help kind of pass those out to, if you want to give us.
I think that's a great idea, Fred. I think getting a full year or two under our belt, though, was probably the way to go with that. I think the answer to that, though, is those signs you guys put out on the streets are fantastic.
Yeah.
Every
Yeah.
citizen in Evans sees those signs. And I think as long as we keep the progress going and using the money what it's for, which we will do, those signs are going to be out there all the time. So people are going to see where their 1% is going. I think they're really appreciative of it. Signs were a great addition. Great.
That certainly is a good point, Mayor, because more people see what's in the water bill, but just that, as Mark pointed out, that 1.2 million in 6 months, I think if people really looked at that, they would realize just how important that tax was to get things done.
Anyone else? Comments or questions? Great job. Thanks for keeping such good track of that. We promised we would, and we would. So, thank you. Item is the consideration of possible amendments to section 508-205B of the Evans Municipal Code to allow sanctioned boxing or other combative sports events to occur on licensed premises to the extent allowable under Colorado law.
Thank you, Mayor. Approximately 6 weeks ago, 6 to 8 weeks ago, the city had a request from a couple different parties to hold a boxing event, a couple boxing events at the Moose Lodge, and unfortunately, in this case, we had to deny the permit just based on our city code. Just in that we do have a fairly definite prohibition against those kinds of events. Approximately a month ago, the council requested that staff come back with a work session, some more information about what could be allowed to hold those types of events. So our assistant city attorney has done a lot of research on this and is prepared to present an overview of what the state law does allow and what the city code, what our city could allow. Following that, we'll certainly be eager to hear your discussion and take any direction for what you'd like to see for this type of issue.
Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, boxing is heavily regulated in the state of Colorado, defined, but if it's allowed through state permitting by the rules issued by the Colorado Combative Sports Commission, it can be allowed. Our liquor ordinance or code is chapter 5.08 of the Evans Municipal Code, and it blanketly prohibits any fight night or similar event at a liquor licensed establishment. So it was on that basis that this particular application from March 12th was denied. We could amend that, or City Council could amend Chapter 5.08 to allow boxing events provided that they're permitted under state law. This application would have been permitted because it was sanctioned by a National Olympic Committee, which is allowable as a boxing event under state law.
Real quick question, technical item. When you say boxing, does that include MMA? Is it the same sport category, or is that something?
Include MMA.
So those events could be sanctioned and therefore
Correct.
allowed.
But you just were referring to boxing. I want to make sure.
Correct.
What are some of the other
Sure.
examples?
Boxing under Title 12 of the Colorado Revised Statutes is defined as fighting, striking, forcing an opponent to submit, or disabling an opponent, including the disciplines of kickboxing, mixed martial arts, and martial arts. And so it really is a combative sporting event, and if it is allowed under the rules of the Colorado Combative Sporting Commission or otherwise provided for in Title 12, which really relates to professional boxing events, then it would be allowed, if it's permitted under state law, to occur in the city if the municipal code were amended to allow those events. So the question would be, would City Council like to amend its liquor licensing code to allow those types of events at liquor license facilities? And then a second question would be, would the City Council like to amend to allow those types of events that are allowable under state law to occur under a temporary use permit to any establishment in the city, as long as they're following state law requirements and that the event. That concludes my remarks. Those are the questions we have.
Questions of staff or comments?
I'm all in favor of doing it. I mean, as long as it's a sanctioned event, as you pointed out, and this one would have been, I'm completely in favor. In places like the Moose Lodge and everything like that, they're gonna usually have security, they're gonna have good staffing and everything for security. And I think that in order to promote, sporting events, whether it's boxing or any other type of sporting event, especially in these areas for young, local, probably, up and coming, fighters, I think this would be a great opportunity for them to showcase what they have, and I would be in favor of it.
Mayor, just Pro Tem's comment made me think of one other probably pertinent piece of information. Staff would recommend that if you choose that temporary use permit, that process would require an applicant like the Moose Lodge or anybody else to bring forward a plan to the city that would demonstrate ability to manage traffic, set the number of people allowed based on the premises and the fire codes and all that. It would, it would require the security plan, all of those kinds of things that would be spelled out in the application permit, and also that would come back in your ordinance. And then the reason why Drew and we are recommending a temporary use permit, that could allow a premises to have those kinds of events, but it could be reviewed annually to ensure that they had complied with their application. So just one kind of control would be in place if you decided to move forward.
Other comments or questions?
So, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So will we have any fees or penalties if they are non-compliant then? So if they say they were going to have 1,000 people there and they have 2,000 people there, or if they, agree to certain regulations with the liquor and it turns out to be something that's not encompassed in their permit?
Well, their liquor license is subject to regulation if they violate terms of the liquor license ordinance or the Evans Municipal Code. So it wouldn't necessarily be a penalty that would be applied, a financial penalty, but it would be action that the city could take with respect to their business license or their liquor license, which would be a severe consequence for not following the requirements of the code.
And use permit could be revoked if they were in violation of their terms.
That's kind of where I want to go with it. If they are not adhering to the terms that we set forth, that there's a penalty for it.
Yes, it could be revoked. That's true. Temporary uses are renewable on an annual basis. It could not be renewed. We could also include a provision where it's on an event-by-event basis, depending on what City Council wants to do.
I have a question to follow that, if that's okay. Sorry for it.
Go ahead.
So when you all are speaking of revoking the licenses, say they should mess up, I just want to be clear for me, if we revoke it, it would happen right then. It wouldn't be on renewal, right? Or would it be, you know what I mean? So say they get a license in March and it won't expire till end of February the next year. If they mess up anywhere in there and we say, yeah, let's revoke or whatnot, would it revoke in that time frame, or would it be at the end of March the following year when their license is up? That's when it would be revoked.
Depends on the nature. If we're looking at the liquor license issue, we could put a provision in there that would allow the city to revoke a temporary permit. In temporary use application, we could also add provisions in there. Currently, the way it is, we have certain temporary uses that are listed in Title 18, the temporary uses, and a sanctioned combative sporting event is not in one of those uses. So that part of the code would have to be amended anyway. And then those types of applications are renewed annually or not renewed on an annual basis.
But if we had a problem, the question is, could we revoke it mid-year?
Yes.
Yeah, like right then. Because I wouldn't want them to have another 9-10 months of breaking whatever they're breaking, you know what I mean? That was my question. Side note, I did have one of my neighbors ask me about this, just in general. They wanted to have some type of stuff like this in the city of Evans, so I did have a resident ask me.
What I would say, maybe put in the application for the temporary permit that says if you violate this permit, you are subject to a possible business license suspension and or your liquor license not being renewed. Put it in there, that way when they're filling out that application, it's quite clearly on there, hey, you violate these terms.
Yes, that could be included.
So my question, because it's just kind of piggybacking on the revocation, is, if we give them a year and it's now it's a every Friday night event, and now we've got the police out there breaking up fights in the parking lot because everybody's, wired and fired up. How are we going to take care of that kind of an issue?
Well, my understanding from the state permitting process is that every event has to be permitted by the state, and it is heavily regulated by the state and the Colorado Combative Sports Commission. So these are sanctioned events. The state regulations are not, it's actually a misdemeanor to have a non-sanctioned event to occur where if people are hosting some sort of amateur fight that's not permitted by the state. That's a misdemeanor in the state of Colorado. So the Colorado Combative Sports Commission has fairly rigorous requirements, which are you have to be sanctioned by a National Olympic Committee or another professional sports committee. So it's not just any type of event that happens on every Friday night that would be allowed under state law, which would be, of course, a necessary requirement for our code too.
But if that were to happen, we could take their permit. If we
That's
had
fine.
problems, they were violating their permit with us, regardless of their not with the state.
I just want, if it's using up our already thin police resources, at all these fights, because it turns into, more of a problem, then I certainly don't want to be carte blanche on the licensing.
One thing I will say on how often it would be a problem, I kind of roam around in this world. Like I just had one of my wrestlers fight last weekend in Wyoming. Josie Caleras, he lost. They don't happen very often. You're talking probably at most twice a year is how often those would happen. So I see what your point is, but it wouldn't be an every Friday or a once a month thing. The sport just doesn't handle that. They build it up for 6 months and have their one event and then do it again every 6 months. So, and here in Evans, I don't know, I can't speak for it, but I think we only have about one place that could host something like this right now anyway. So I don't see it being a issue all over our city. Other than the one that applied for it already, I don't see where else you would have around here.
And do the licensees, do they, well, I guess this is a side thing. I don't know if they're going to be participating in safe sport like all of the, or like boxing and hockey and that is a requirement to have participation.
That would come with their thing from the sanction.
Yeah.
The sanctioning body would be the ones that control that. And like Drew said, they're real strict. Fred, you want to hop in there?
And I'm assuming since this is a sanctioned event, the state will have somebody there to monitor the ring size and the safety equipment for the fighters and the ring. If it's a boxing ring, they've got certain requirements for safety.
Yes, that is a part of the duties of the Colorado Combative Sports Commission is to regulate the relative weight among fighters, the health of fighters, whether people have been knocked out or not, the safety, and that is what they do in the permitting. I don't know whether they send someone to every event, but I do know in the permitting process those are the types of things that are required as considerations by the
Other comments or questions? I'm with Mayor Pro Tem. I'm fully in favor of this. I think it'd be a great addition for our city. I hope we can get them to do a couple of them in a year. I think it's a great thing. Tammy said she's had neighbors interested in it. I know a lot of my people I roll around with are interested in this kind of stuff, and it'd be a great thing for Evans and just for the community in general. I think it'd be fantastic. I'm in big time favor. Anyone else not in favor of it? Let's go ahead and move forward with it. Yep.
Support?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank
We'll
you.
come back with the appropriate ordinances.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the Master Plan Water Conservation Chapter. Turn it back to you, Jim.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm starting to think that the council might be able to give this presentation based on the number of times that you've seen our water efficiency plan and all of the various water planning pieces that we've been doing over the last few months. And that's exciting because I think we're getting our ducks in a row for long-term water sustainability and conservation. In a best practices master plan, there is a water management, water conservation chapter, and the master plan steering committee and our staff and the consultant on our water Marjo Kirkus is with us tonight. And so we'd like to just recap what you'll have tonight is really excerpts of what you've seen previously boiled down into the master plan proposed document. I know that this work has already been through the master plan steering committee, of which the mayor and Councilmember Mortensen are a part, so they might have anything to add to. But I will ask our community development director, Ann Bess Johnson, to give an overview of the master plan portion of our water conservation planning. Take it away, Ann.
Thank you,
You've got a
Jim.
couple more minutes, I think, tonight.
Thank you. So, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Jim, and Marjo, who's on Zoom floating up there. Happy to be presenting this chapter to you. So as Jim had indicated, I think this is the third time you've seen this. The water efficiency plan was brought forth to you in late 2020. The water chapter of the master plan was written by Marjo Kirkus with staff in September of last year. But what you see before you tonight is the format for the master plan and with the principles and the strategies. So rather than read everything to you because it's not new, we'll just go over the broad principles and then each principle with its strategies. And so if you have some questions on each, we can discuss them now. But you can see there are 5 water conservation principles that will be implemented into the master plan. And the slide deck that you see before you now, it's on that, but those edits are reflective of what the master plan steering committee as well as planning commission had to say about this particular chapter. So the first principle is that Evans will promote the wise use of water. And we've crossed off in the residential and commercial sector because it just needs to be community-wide. The second principle is Evans will align city codes, zoning, policies, and development with the approved water master efficiency plan and other municipal plans. We just want to make sure our codes and policies are talking to each other and aren't contradicting each other. The third principle is Evans will sustainably manage its water resource to enhance community resilience. We want to make sure that Evans is looking at ways to stretch the water that we have so that Evans can continue to grow. The fourth principle is Evans will protect its watersheds and promote watershed health for the South Platte, the Big Thompson, and the ditch environments. So there are lots of different mechanisms and tools that we can use to engage in watershed protection. And the fifth principle is that Evans will use easements, acquisitions, and other creative strategies to protect watersheds and promote new housing opportunities in town. So again, those are the 5 principles. So the 5 big goals that the city wants to accomplish through that water efficiency plan, through the water chapter, and then this is now diluted down to these 5 principles. So moving forward with principle number 1 is that Evans will promote the wise use of water. And there is a wise statement there. We need to We want to save up to 2.7 million, or I'm sorry, I have really bad eyes. We want to save up to 27 million gallons of water per year by promoting water efficiency in the city. And then to achieve this type of savings, it does require that Evans build the public's awareness of the benefits of saving water and of water conservation methods and adoption of water efficiency technology. So in order to do that, there are these strategies here. And again, I'm not going to read those strategies to you, but if anybody has a comment on those strategies, we can discuss that now. If not, we'll move on. So does anybody want to make a comment? Okay.
And that second one, the city leads by example. I don't know how many times in the past I've heard people complain about, not necessarily this community, but various other communities, about the water running at midnight. And so we certainly don't want to have that happening in Evans. It's a constant complaint across the country from people.
So moving on, there are a few other strategies on this last slide. And the majority of these strategies are collaborating with others, collaborating with Northern Colorado Water Conservation District, collaborating with our neighbors, and as well as seeking funding for plan implementation, which the city has been successful doing already.
And as you transition, one thing I'll remind, because it's helpful for me when I'm looking at this stuff, different from some of the other planning that we do, the master plan is kind of this 10-year longer term guideline. So that's why it's important that the strategies memorialize these important partnerships and some of the longer term, higher level things that we're doing. I know for me, sometimes I think, boy, that's going to be a ways. But that's okay with this because it's really a longer term plan that we're looking at.
Right. Sometimes thanks for saying that, because sometimes overachieving staff think we've got to do this tomorrow. So we're trying, but we have to cut ourselves some slack.
Right.
Thank you. So then moving on to principle 2 is that Evans City Code's zoning policies and development will align with direction provided in the water efficiency plan and other municipal plans, including the master plan. And so the why statement on that, the main reason, and Marjo discovered this through her research, is that nearly 70% of the city's treated water is used for residential purposes. And of that water use, nearly for outdoor watering during May through October. So that's heavy consumption for outdoor watering of our potable water. And so one of the ways that we can reduce that pressure is to ensure that new development is designed to be water efficient from the start. And then moving into our strategies, then is taking a look at our zoning code and development standard revisions that result in more water efficient development, whether that be through having bioswales and other less defined stormwater treatment so that it can also be used in the landscaping, whether that be through promoting the use of other types of plant material that might be less water consuming, and accepting use of other materials in the landscape that are also decorative, such as rock formations, even some artwork that just might be attractive but low maintenance in the right setting. Of course, it needs to be in the right setting. So then also identify areas of the city to promote clustering, redevelopment, and smaller, more compact lots that support water efficient use as well. So were there any comments regarding these strategies before we move on to the next ones for principle 2?
Well, I would like to remind the council again, I've been pushing up for this for over 20 years, is trying to find some way to provide non-potable water for that summer irrigation period to all residents in Evans, even if the city has to pay, rather than trying to make the residents pay the tap fees. But I think this is a very important issue that still needs to be addressed. But figure out some way to do it. Because obviously those percentages point out how much of a reduction we could have in the cost of purchasing that treated water and treating it from Greeley.
Councilmember, just there is an item in the council's work plan for the year, and therefore our work plan to complete that, what I call a mini study on what that would take, is to start to give us an idea of if it's feasible and how we do it. So we'll have that later this year.
Thank you.
Moving forward to the next strategies for this principle 2 is identify opportunities to create incentives and update the development code to achieve water efficient landscapes. So whether that be with the new water coordinator position, identifying grants and other opportunities to offer the community ways to, I've seen some communities have garden in the boxes where they can replace bluegrass with perennials and other plants that are less water consuming, or our water fixture program that we're going to be kicking off. So just create different opportunities to save water while still being attractive. Are there any questions regarding these principles or strategies to support the principle? Right. And the last bit on principle. There are some ways to adopt different ordinances and covenants to prevent prohibition on water efficient landscapes and subdivision covenants. A lot of this are moving forward, but some subdivisions may want to be retroactive. Create incentives and update the land development code to promote indoor water efficiency, as well as ensure adequate and water supplies are available for new development. Are there any questions about these? Okay, we'll keep moving forward. Principle 3, the City of Evans will sustainably manage its water resource to enhance community resilience. And the why statement's really long, and I am going to, even though it's big up there, my eyes still can't see it very well. So bear with me here. We really want to have a sustainable supply of clean water. The state of Colorado water plan projects that by 2030 there's going to be a 20% gap between Colorado's water supply and municipal supply. Marjo's work, and Marjo, you can chime in if you'd like to, indicated that Evans is sitting okay for that. Our gap won't be that big, but if we don't keep planning and making changes, the gap will get that big. But right now, what we're doing by your work and leadership, is we are making plans so that we're not in that pool of communities with that gap. Marjo, did you want to say anything?
No, I think you summed that up well. And I would just say, given, Northern is doing a lot of the work in sort of looking at some of that long-term supply because of your being within, the Colorado basin. The affordability of water going forward will probably be one of your long-term challenges. So the more you can do to be efficient now, the larger return on your investments in the future. So I think it's a good strategy for you, and continue doing the good work you're doing.
Thank you. So moving on then to the strategies that support Principle 3. again, and Councilman Neal discussed the citywide non-potable water supply system. That definitely is something that the city wants to continue to explore. Updating water resource management plans, develop a mechanism to support regional collaboration. Again, keep applying for granting agencies and perform water rate and fee studies. Any questions on these strategies before we move to the next? Okay, so principle 4 then. This is to protect the watershed and promote watershed health for the South Platte, Big Thompson, and the ditch environments. If we don't have a healthy watershed, we're not going to have healthy water here in the city. And the why statement is that, the city of Evans really suffered pretty devastating results from the floods of September of 2013. The city did adopt new floodplain regulations and a stormwater master plan in 2016 and developed the South Platte River Restoration Plan in 2015. And these natural floodplains really are good filters for stormwater runoff. They provide recreational opportunities and habitat, and when left undeveloped, they help safely convey. So then the strategies to achieve this principle is to develop water quality protection standards for water bodies and wetlands. And there's lots of different ways that we can do that, whether that be setbacks or, right now there is absolutely no development allowed per FEMA in the floodway. So do we look at different ways of encouraging preservation of that floodplain while not taking somebody's rights to develop their property? Develop a plan for managing stormwater discharge along the South Platte River, how best to do that to make sure it's clean. Any questions regarding these strategies? Oh, and the last one snuck on there, implement the South Platte River Restoration Plan. And we are doing that. Staff is doing that and trying to figure out ways to reconnect the river. So the next strategies under Principle 4 is incorporate water efficient and native landscapes into the city and neighborhood public lands management. You'll see that some of the strategies are going to start crossing with other principles, and some of the strategies in principles are also going to start crossing and linking with other chapters. There's a lot of correlation between this chapter and our natural resources chapter. There's a lot of correlation in this chapter with housing as well. How can we up that density and maybe work out a system to do land preservation while upping density somewhere else? So another goal is to implement the stormwater management plan recommendations to integrate on-site stormwater management best practices. So what are some of those new ways? Instead of just doing stormwater management and water quality the way we've been doing them for the past several years, are there other opportunities that creative staff and engineering and operations can work with developers on implementing a new way of thinking that helps solve lots of different problems? Are there any questions on this slide? Okay. So the fifth principle is that Evans will use easements, acquisitions, and other creative strategies to protect watershed and promote new housing opportunities in the city of Evans. So some of the ways that the why statement is here is we don't have unlimited resources, so we have to be creative to acquire and protect the river watershed. Allowing developers density bonuses for in-town development in exchange for the purchase of easements in other areas might be one way and one tool in order to do that. And then we need to work with the development community and other nonprofits to create opportunities for this type of tool to occur. So some of the strategies that support this principle is we could explore a transfer development rights program, create a master plan for the river corridor that identifies potential locations for access, trail access, and prioritizes land acquisition of critical areas. And then there's a big long list of everything that it would be included in that. And then use development agreements as well as site improvements agreement during development to allow for the donation or sale of land to the city or some land trust to protect key natural areas. It's also a tool that has been used by farmers and ranchers to also recoup some development potential while keeping then their property free of development. And that concludes our presentation tonight. Are there any other questions that you have regarding the water chapter and what you do like, what you are really excited about? And staff is just seeking your concurrence that this is how you would like to proceed before the consultants now start integrating more of Marjo's previous work into the narrative of the comp plan, master plan.
Questions of staff or comments about this stuff?
I think it's going written. I think it's got a great long-term strategy. Everything.
I sit on this, so we've seen it a couple times, so we're good.
Thank you. Thank you, Marjo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item on the agenda is the discussion of Riverside Park improvements.
Mayor, council's aware the major construction project on Riverside Park was a major project for us, and following completion of that major work and phase, we have been finalizing all of our grants. We've also been finalizing any of the work. We had a work session probably more than a year ago with the council, a couple of years now, on additional, we still have some money, pretty flexible money at this point. Not, as I said, we've completed all of our grant requirements. So we have some money left in the kind of park fund that was used for that project. At the last work session, year and a half, 2 years ago, the council gave some direction on some of the kind of finishing improvements that we could make, things that we didn't fit into the project for various reasons, into the big project. And I think the good news is we've completed all of that work. And so staff has been thinking, and Scott, who works out there and has crews out there, along with the rest of our staff who use the facilities, have put their heads together and said, hey, we still have a little bit of that money from a couple years ago that the council dedicated to those finishing improvements. Still have, I believe, is it about $60,000? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. So Scott here gets to talk about, he's here tonight to talk about the work that we've done and some of staff's recommendations for additional improvements, things that will make the park work even better and just continue finishing. That'll turn it over to Scott.
Thank you, Jim.
Sure.
Mayor, members of council, thank you for letting me come speak to you about this evening. So like Jim said, we did a bunch of stuff in 2019. Came back to you, we asked for a revision of $180,000 and took care of several I wouldn't say they were all minor details, but just little things that we weren't able to include in the overall big part of the project. Overflow parking, entryway signage, just to name a few of those. And when we got done with those, we ended up coming in under budget and had some savings there. And so we kind of went back to the park and looked at, is there anything else we had missed? We were able to use the park for about a year. And then really sat down and discussed what kind of maybe we were missing. And so I shown you that list in the staff report, but wanted to just kind of go through and clarify some of these things real quick. The crowd control barricades that you saw in the report, when we built that multi-sport field, the soccer field and just whatever right there where on the old CDOT property, after we built the overflow parking and all that, one of our concerns is errant balls coming off of that field and kids just running out there and chasing after that. So we wanted some way to slow them down, but still have something that was easy and movable. One of the things we learned from having Heritage Day out there was a permanent fence on the edge of that field was really going to hem us in. And up there was a permanent fence on the edge of that field was really going to